And welcome. Can I particularly welcome Brianna Williams and Finn Kirby Pinko, our two youth councillors that are joining us this morning. I'm going to ask Councillor Kamatua to begin with a particularly special prayer this morning.
Te mea tōtahi māku I raru I te maru I tēnei whare. Nei rā te mihi mai oha kia koutou. Nick, tēnā koe, kia koutou rā te kaunihira matua o whakatū. Nei rā te mihi. I roto I tēnā ka hoki ngā whakaaro ki a rātou mā. I koe mā koro mā I rungi a tātou katoa. I tangi hea I mihi hea ki a rātou. Ki te whāri ki hea, ngā aroha ki te whānau whānui I raro I te kapua pauri o rātou. Nō reira, Rachel, Tim, mihi aroha ki o whānau, te wehinga atu o koroa whaia. Nō reira, kei te mihi atu ki a koutou katoa, kei noi tata. I horori I korore ki te atu I rangarawa, hei maungaronga ki te whenua. Ia kāro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Hanga I te atu he ngā kauhau tu I tēnā o mātou. Whakatongi atu wairua tapu, hei awhina ngā whānau I raro I te kapua pauri I tēnei rā, ki te whakakaha I a rātou wairua. Ki te whakakaha o ki te kaunihira I tēnei wā I rungi te huarahi tika mō a tātou hāpori. I rungi I tō ingoi kura te amini.
And it's my turn to give the karakia this morning and we'll proceed. Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā ka kua ko Tim, me Rachel, kai o Māti, huhua o te mutu, hari rā, ko te aroha, ko te wairoa, ko ngā whakapai, ka runga, ka raro, ko roto, ki waho, ho.
Okay. Yeah.
In those prayers, we sadly acknowledge the loss of Tim's dad and also Rachel's mum in the last month, and can only pass on our condolences and appreciate the loss of a mum or dad for any one of us is a sad time. Are there any apologies for this morning's council meeting? Just in confirmation of order of business, we've got a big agenda. It is my intention to defer the third part of the Mayor's report in which there is an acknowledgement to just before morning tea where Laurie's joining us. It is my intention to try and get through the public business this morning and then to deal with the confidential business this afternoon. I've had a bit of a development in my own family in which I'm leaving for Australia this evening. It has coincided with the time when Rohan is travelling over to Copenhagen as part of the Whakatū delegation on the climatorium, and Trudy Brand will be standing in as acting mayor for Friday, Saturday, Sunday until I come back to New Zealand. Good luck, Trudy. If it all goes to cusp with a civil defence emergency, the city is in good hands. Are there any interests that members wish to declare for today's meeting? That being the case, we will move to the public forum and I invite Kathleen Martin from the Nelson Food Bank before the committee, and right from the word go would want to acknowledge your work. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you all today. My name is Kathy Martin and I'm the chair of the Nelson Community Food Bank. With me is Wendy Logan, who is the chair of Family Start, one of our agencies. And I'd also like to introduce Shirley Stevenson. Shirley has been with Food Bank I think almost from the beginning, about 30 years ago. So she's been very valuable having her input into our organisation still. The reason we've asked to address the public forum is firstly to acknowledge the very generous grant that Nelson City Council has recently given Foodbank from the Community Investment Fund. This grant will be put to very good use in helping us to provide the good quality, healthy food parcels for those in need in our community. And secondly, we'd just like to give you an update on Foodbank. I'm not sure how much everyone knows about it, so I'll just go quickly through how we operate. So Foodbank is a not-for-profit charity that was formed around 30 years ago. It started off as a small grassroots community group run entirely by volunteers. Its purpose is to provide food parcels for those in the community who are experiencing food poverty or food insecurity. For many years, Foodbank remained a very small operation, but in recent years it has grown significantly. You can see from the overhead just how much our service has grown over the last 7 to 8 years, and particularly during the COVID years, the last 3 years, where it more or less doubled. In the last year, we distributed around over 3,700 parcels to over 12,000 individuals. I don't imagine that the people like Shirley who started Foodbank up could have foreseen just how much it would grow and that there would still be such a huge need 30 years later. Food poverty or food insecurity is an issue across the whole of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Food security is defined as sustainable access to affordable and nutritious food. It's estimated that 14% or more of New Zealanders are food insecure. The 2008-2009 New Zealand National Nutrition Survey indicated that only 3 out of 5 households were classified as almost or fully food secure. And in a recent interview on Q&A, the Auckland City Missioner, Helen Robinson, referred to the thousands and thousands of families that they are seeing regularly who simply don't have enough money to buy food. And the effects of food poverty are widespread and are associated with a large number of detrimental health outcomes. It is recognised as a serious health issue. So while I don't have any data about the level of food insecurity in our region, it's fair to assume it mirrors that across the whole country. And the continued level of demand for Nelson Foodbank food parcels is evidence of this. Just recently, we had the highest number of requests that we've ever had in 1 week of operation. So now just a little bit more about how we operate. Foodbank partners with a number of welfare and health services and other local and charities, as you can see from the overhead. And over the years, we've partnered with many other organisations such as Budget Service, the Gateway Housing Trust. We operate mainly within the Nelson area, usually as far north as Haira, and extend into Tasman as far as Brightwater. People needing a food parcel go through one of these agencies who will then determine the most appropriate way to support them. They may have been referred through WINS, they may self-refer, or they may already be a client of that agency. And once the agency has assessed the client's need, they forward the request for a food parcel onto Foodbank. People may receive an emergency one-off food parcel, or they may continue to get parcels over some months while being supported by their agency with appropriate wraparound support services. Our food parcels are designed to provide 3 meals a day for up to 4 days and are based on the healthy food pyramid, including fruit and vegetables, which is where the NCC grant will be put to very good use. So thank you for that again. When the food parcel is received by Foodbank, our dedicated and hardworking band of 30 or so volunteers get to work to package the parcel and then deliver it on the very same day directly to the clients' homes. So while we do have some paid staff, Foodbank is still very much a voluntary organisation. Without our volunteers, Foodbank would simply not be able to function. We operate from leased premises at the Habitat Hub in Kahungunu Drive. This is a very good central point for our operations and enables us to engage with the other volunteer organisations that are housed there. For example, there's a group called The Buzz, which is a group that supports young people transitioning from school to the workforce. And the young people from Buzz help Foodbank with a variety of tasks, and at the same time, they're gaining work experience. For income, we rely mainly on public donations and grants from a range of funders. Over the last 3 years, we have been receiving funding from MSD, which was specifically to provide food parcels to those affected by COVID or in isolation. This funding enabled us to expand our service to meet the ever-growing need. However, this funding has come to an end, although there is the possibility of some additional funding, which was announced by the government recently. I'd like to now acknowledge the amazing support we receive from the public at large. There are many individuals and family who have been regularly donating to Food Bank, and their generosity over the years has been a vital support for Food Bank. We have a number of initiatives underway to raise money, including a Give a Little page, a midwinter food drive, which has been very widely supported by a number of organisations, including some schools. There's some images of school children with their donations up there, and many local businesses. You'll see here a trailer load of food which was collected by the Chamber of Commerce and delivered recently to Food Bank. They raised or collected over $7,000 worth of food, which is an amazing amazing job. So thank you very much to everyone from Chamber of Commerce who was involved in that. And at the same time, I'd also like to acknowledge the Nelson City Council staff who collected up food and delivered it. Their collection was valued at over $2,500. So thank you very much to all the staff involved in that. I'd just like to finish by acknowledging the wonderful support we get from so many people in the business community, retailers and local food producers. We regularly receive significant donations of supplies such as honey, peanut butter, apples, kiwi fruit, eggs and meat. We receive food via the New Zealand Food Network, and recently we've started receiving food from an organisation called Meet the Need, which I believe may have originated in Golden Bay, that organisation. This support and generosity makes a huge difference to our operating expenses. And one of our ongoing supporters is New World. For a number of years, New World and Stoke and Nelson have run the Family to Family campaign, where people purchase a bag for $20, which New World then matches up dollar for dollar. This support has been extremely valuable to us over the years. However, despite the large amount of donated food, Food Bank still needs to buy in a lot of food. Our monthly food bill can vary anything from $12,000 to over $20,000. And of course, we do have other expenses. So funding remains very much an ongoing challenge for us. I'll just finish by saying our hope is that in time, there will be a better solution to relieving food poverty than relying on volunteer organisations such as food banks. But in the meantime, Food Bank, the Nelson Food Bank does have the means and the resources to continue our service. And we very much value the generosity of the public, the business community, and our funders, such as Nelson City Council, who make this possible. Thank you.
I think Council collectively wants to, one, thank you for the update, but more importantly for the work that you do in the community. The figures that you've presented us with respect to that very sharp increase is a real sign of that cost of living crisis that's affecting so many communities across New Zealand, including Nelson. I was a little bit taken back that you said that MSD has not renewed their grant to our local food bank. And maybe that is something that we can follow up. Have I heard that correctly?
They haven't said they won't. Recently, the government announced a grant of $6 million and plus some. The expectation is that the priority will be to the North Island, to the areas affected by the flooding. But we have been told we will get some. At this stage, they're not in a position to indicate how much. So we are certainly expecting some.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
I know that collectively the council would want to be supportive. We're happy to step up as council, but the government's resources are 10 times ours, and they need to be part of the solution as well. Take a couple of questions, then we'll move to the next forum. Councillor Stenson.
Thanks, Mena, through the chair. Kia ora, Catherine. Thanks so much for all that you do. I was just curious as to whether the food bank works with any of the other organisations, such as the Hapori Food Box. I'm aware that that's an initiative of Te Whatu Ora,
Right.
and the Nelson Environment Centre to get boxes of fresh fruit and vegetables out into the community. And I just wondered whether you've ever, whether you are aware of it and whether you ever look at kind of collaborating with other.
We don't work specifically with those, Councillor Sampson. We do work with food Kai Rescue. But we have our manager is doing an amazing job at liaising in the community and looking at every way, of collaborating with other organisations. And I'm sure he's aware of those. But yeah, and we do get supported by the New Zealand Food Network.
Yeah, great. And I'm sure, I think Kai Rescue is also a Nelson Environment Centre initiative, so
Yes.
it'll be part
Yeah.
of the same thing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Skinner.
Hey, thank you for that. Just a couple of clarifications. Cost of living crisis is a real concern. It has been for a while, but seems to be very peaking at the moment. Is that what you'd say? It's getting worse, not better?
Yes, yes, Councillor Skinner, from our experience, it's certainly getting worse. And I think our agencies would, certainly be in a position to, acknowledge that.
And your figures there you had of distribution over the year, 1,250 parcels for this year. Is that nationwide or is that Nelson?
That's for the Nelson.
Nelson.
Yeah.
And quickly, one last query. What area of people is it? What age group is mainly being affected? I imagine it's across the board, but is there an age group or families or pensioners?
All age groups, certainly. Families, very much so.
Young families.
Young families, yeah.
And they're just and it's just getting to the point where the income from either or is just not covering the bills and the
Absolutely.
food.
And I think there's increased cost of rents as well. So the food's the last thing once they've paid their
Yeah.
rents, etc. Yeah, and obviously, I've just got a case study of one of our families. We deal with Family Start. Mum's at home with a young baby. Dad's earning a minimum
Yeah.
wage, and they've just moved into rental property. And then there was a car bill, so Dad needed the car to get to work.
Yeah.
So so that's when they need a food parcel. So there is other issues that are creating it as well as the food costs. That's for sure.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you again for your work, both Kathleen and Wendy. Please pass on to your wider team of volunteers how appreciative the council is of those efforts, and let's keep in touch and coordinating our services to help carry us through this difficult period.
Once again, thank you for your support.
Thank you.
I now invite Michael Rodwell, who's asked to make a presentation at Public Forum on the issue of vaping in our community. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to introduce someone else to the table, Julie Ivory. I don't have an overhead, but sadly, Julie's. I should speak to the microphone. I don't have an overhead presentation, but sadly, Julie's a representation, a victim of what I've come to talk about today. Just to say, I know 5 of you around the table. Personally, it's quite amazing for an old man that doesn't live in Nelson. And I did sit around the table as a councillor years ago, and a 20-page agenda would be a really busy time. And we had no code of conduct in those days. And I can remember going home and reading the front page of what was in the Nelson Evening Mail, and the town clerk had called me a no-hoper. And I didn't like that actually at first. And I laughed. It helps us sell newspapers. We've got a diminishing circulation of the newspaper, and perhaps the old times were, far more interesting. Look, local government, and a lot of people would agree with his comments, of course. So, perhaps more people would buy the paper. Look, I've come here today to talk about an issue that really concerns me. It's not directly actually involving local government. It's a federal government issue, but I feel so concerned about it, and I've really come to blow the whistle on the issue, a whistleblower. I've made some notes which I'll quickly. I won't be here very long, but it's to do with vaping, young people vaping, and I've been doing some research, and it's really disturbing. But so I'll read to you some notes that I've penned. A 2021 World Health Report clearly stated that children who use vapes double their chances of taking up cigarette smoking. Do I need to go any further? Julie's a victim of this. Julie, tell them how many cigarettes you smoked.
60 a day.
That's about one every 12 minutes in the daytime. You're sleeping half the time. And Julie's had a stroke. It's attributable to it's a very addictive habit. We all know the adverse impact cigarette smoking has on our health, and we don't want to see a new generation of our young going down that addictive path. Some say vaping might not be as harmful as cigarette smoking. Well, I can tell you, vapes contain hermocatins such as propylene glycol and vegetable glycerine that heat up to make the vapor. As they break down, these generate other harmful components, including highly toxic formaldehyde. That's what really got me, that's very, very toxic. That's what got me started on doing some research. No one knows how vaping will affect respiratory health long term. What we do know is that nicotine is exceedingly addictive, and there's science to suggest that it can lead to the conflicting development of adolescent brain. The argument for keeping nicotine levels as they are and making vape products accessible is that they help cigarette smokers quit the addiction. If smoking is our main objective, we could have followed Australia's leads. Since October 2021, vape products with nicotine are prescription only. Currently, there are no plans to reduce nicotine levels or limit the number of vape shops here in New Zealand. I just wonder it's an 18-year age limit. I don't know if local governments are involved in monitoring that in the shop, in the stores. That would be, it's just an ongoing research for me. But look, I only did this paper about 10 days ago. And since then, I've come across some more information on which I'll quickly read as an addendum to my original paper. Stanford Medical Newsletter, just recently, in the last, about 8 days ago, and its heading reads, "What Parents Should Know About Vaping." Hundreds of people in the United States have contracted a condition newly termed vaping-associated pulmonary injury, and more than 25 have already died from it. In New Zealand, the number of Year 10 students, which is about age 14, vape daily has tripled from 3.1% in 2019 to 9.6% in 2021. So, and one of the companies, Juul, who first put its cigarettes on the market just over 4 years ago, is now valued at 38 billion. Obviously, there's an attraction to sell these vapes. Look, thank you for listening to me. It's not directly a local government issue, but I just feel I'm advocating for frustrated parents that probably don't know where to turn. Headmasters are too busy running the schools. So I just feel someone's got to be out there advocating for our young. It's a very serious situation. But thanks for your time. I don't know whether I can answer any specific questions pertaining to it. I am interested on who monitors the age. I went into one of these shops, and there was a sign at about height of a 12-year-old, and it said starter kits. So it's children that remotely interested in smoking as taking up this vaping, which is the World Health Report said leads on to smoking. So, hey, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Mike, and for raising the issue of vaping. I remember when Parliament debated it, the companies advocating for vaping sold it very much as a safer way for people to be able to leave smoking. And what we've seen is something quite different and a whole new constituency of people. I've heard from many principals that it is a substantive issue in our community. Local government has a limited role, but it's entirely appropriate for you to come today. I'm happy to take a couple of questions. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and thank you, Mike, for coming along and for the topic that you're speaking on. And it's good to see you again. Mike, only 2 days ago, Tuesday morning, a parent, I had a coffee with a parent, drew to my attention, and I've no reason to doubt what she said, that vape shops are now selling tobacco products. Are you aware of that?
Oh.
No.
Well, actually, a member of the public was speaking just before me, said that she noted that although the shops are supposed to be a long way from the schools, quite a lot of them actually right outside school bus stops. So they really get around it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comment.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I work on, I'm on a couple of school boards, and I have to share, it's really an issue at the schools with challenging behaviours, and I do think that there is a groundswell, and I'm sure Youth Council can attest to that. I think this is something that you can possibly collaborate and team up. So I think there is possibly, we could get a critical mass in and around what you consider to be quite a serious problem in the community. So I just encourage you to possibly collaborate with maybe some young people to whatu ora, and hit me up afterwards if you want any ideas or links.
Councillor Rollo.
Thanks, Mayor Nick and Mike. After hearing your first comments on your time on council, I'm too scared to ask a question now on what might be reported on me via the Mayor's comments afterwards.
We're much better behaved these days, don't worry.
What I would say is thank you very much for bringing this topic to the chamber today, because I think council in our community has a vital role to play in putting as much restrictions on this sort of behaviour as possible. And I think if you look at what Wellington City Council did last year in their on-street hospitality dining and putting a ban on smoking and vaping on that property, I think council can actually take a huge lead. So thank you very much for bringing it to the council chamber today.
Mike, any closing comments, and we'll move on to our formal agenda.
This is obviously going to be a debate ongoing there. Sadly, I guess I'll be back here again at some point. There's more and more information coming, adverse information coming to hand on children. I'll repeat. Look, sadly, I'll probably be here again because this is problem's not going to go away, and there's more and more information daily coming to hand. How serious this is. I think personally, I think vaping's much worse than cigarette smoking. How bad's that? I don't know how we got into this situation, but hey, thank you. And as I said, sadly, I'll probably be back again. It's not going to end very soon, I wouldn't think. Vaping shops, there's more vaping shops now than McDonald's. They're prolific. We've got 4 in Richmond. And as I said, they've got signs at about level with 12-year-olds when they go. I guess they're allowed into the shops, but they can't buy the product. But it's pitched at these 12-year-olds, the sign said starter kits. So, but hey, thanks very much.
Thank you for the presentation again.
I'm sorry to be here with this issue.
Some decades ago, you organised the largest petition in Nelson's history in respect of the Stoke bypass. My view is that the primary responsibility around vaping, yes, there are some things that council can do, but rests with central government. I think there would be support if you wish to initiate a petition of Parliament around the loose restrictions we have in New Zealand relative to vaping. I note next door, and I'm used to Australia being worse on these things than us. Actually, they require in Australia a prescription for vaping. And so I've got a lot tougher approach. But that may be another forum, Mike, that you explore in terms of trying to get the issue of vaping addressed. Thank you again for your time this morning.
Just in response to that, I personally appreciate someone that was in Parliament fighting for Nelson. The hospital's another one that comes to mind. That Stoke bypass that you asked me to drive.
I shouldn't have raised it. I've gone off cue. We're on vaping. I need to wrap up and move on, Mike.
There was 20,000 signatures to that.
It was a big petition, and my invitation to you is you organise a bloody good petition, and I think vaping is one of those which it would be welcomed in the community. I think there'd be many, particularly people like Matty, that are involved in schools that would be keen to get behind. Thank you again. We come to the minutes on the agenda. And would a colleague be prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Brand, the adoption of the minutes from the 6th of July. As amended, I must say. And can I compliment Councillor Stallard? There were a couple of issues that you have raised around the minutes, and you were correct, and I appreciate the diligence in making sure those records are correct. And the motion that has been moved by Councillor Courtney and seconded by Councillor Brand is the including those amendments that have been put forward by Councillor Stallard. Is there any discussion on those minutes? I shall then put them. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. Just as a note, it is my intention to carry through to 10:30 when we'll have a substantive break in recognition of Laurie. We come to my Mayor's report on page 23. I do wish to ad lib on the Mayor's report, and it's entirely appropriate that the infrastructure manager and DP chief executive is today our acting with Nigel on leave, because I do think we collectively as the governance unit of council owe a thank you to staff and particularly Alex transport team for the successful introduction of the e-bus service on the 1st of August last week. I said at the beginning of the year, in a practical real sense, the introduction of those e-buses were the biggest single thing that this council was doing this year. There inevitably will be a few bumps, but I just thought I would share with council the information from staff about how successful it has been. There's been a 44% increase in the number of people taking a bus. So the number of average number under the N-bus was 1,800 people per day. In the first week, we had 2,600. Particularly excited to see effectively a threefold increase in the number of use of the buses at the weekend. So if we compare the old N-bus service with the first weekend, going up from 916 journeys to 2,709. And then the other very encouraging figure for me is that 2,600 additional people from Nelson and Tasman have got themselves a B card. And to me, that's indicating that people are making a choice. I've had a lot of positive comment. Yes, there is some areas of criticism, and I know the transport team, but I would like to formally note our thanks to Alec, to Drew, and the full transport team that have done a power of work to get that hugely complex improvement in our public transport services. So acknowledge that, Alec. In respect of my report, you will note that I have covered the decision of the local members' determination by the Remuneration Authority. I have covered off the local government conference, and can I reinforce my thanks to the delegation that went to Christchurch at that conference. Certainly as a new mayor, incredibly useful to be able to engage with colleagues. I do want to reinforce that I was incredibly proud at the session that Rohan, the Deputy Mayor, chaired in respect of the future of local government. If there was a single item that I found most inspiring, it was the presentation on Manchester City in the UK and this concept of city deals between central and local government. And we need to let the general election take place, and where things go But if there was a sort of an inspirational element of the conference, it's the way in which those city deals have been able to transform the city of Manchester. I've also made a note there about the mayoral discretionary fund, and I just note it is not my intention to put resolution number 3. I'm going to use discretion as chair just to take that before morning tea. So I'm going to formally move my mayor's report and seek a seconder for items 1 and 2 in it. Seconded by Councillor Rainey. It is open for discussion. Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the mayor. I just want to come back to the buses. I've just had some feedback from the public that they would like to know where they can pick up the little cards for the timetables. They don't all have access to the internet and things like that, and they some people have issues to get to the bus stop to see the time. So it hasn't been well publicised for them where they can pick up the card. And I know Stoke Library have been great in giving them out because they're behind the counter. But if we could just, is it possible for us to communicate or put that out or just publicise it a little bit better where people can pick up a little card of the timetables of the buses?
I think there's an ongoing challenge in our information that we've got a new generation of people like our youth councillors that are super familiar on the net, and Councillor Brand rightly brings up there are still some people, and particularly for older people, making sure that we've got those paper copies. I'm sure the Deputy Chief Executive will take on board that message to ensure that the new bus timetable is also available in paper form for members of the public, and appreciate that being raised. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge the expression of support on the death of my mum, and really acknowledge all the support that wrapped around us as a family. It really helped. She was a remarkable woman who really lived in service to the community, and just want to acknowledge the support that we've received and from my colleagues as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. And you'll note in my report that the donation that was made in remembrance of your mum is entirely appropriate given her life work and her commitments. Are there any comments on the Mayor's report? Councillor Courtney.
Just one personal comment in respect to buses, following on from Trudy, Councillor Brand. I was in Auckland for a week on a family matter and took the bus everywhere in Auckland. And I'm a total convert now of using the bus. You get a longer ride if you sit at the back of the bus, and you see more when you ride a bus.
I love the example that's being set by Councillor Courtney. You just got to watch out who's driving the bus, because that can be dangerous. Any other? Councillor Bench.
Just to make a comment on the buses, although I did go to Auckland recently, I didn't see you there, Mel. I became fascinated by the e-scooters. I took them everywhere. They were fantastic. We had a great time. The buses going through Stoke, used to see 3 or less people in them. On average, now there's about 8 to 12, and it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I didn't think there'd be a change just like that, and certainly to not of that amount, but there really is.
In my opening comments, I acknowledge the infrastructure team. Can I actually tell the other team of stars on this job is Kim and the comms team. Part of this is actually changing social behaviour and communicating. And I still would also want it noted that I've been involved in a few projects over the years. I think they have done an exceptional job for us in telling the story of the change that's also helped generate those good positive numbers. If there's no further comment on the Mayor's report, I'll put its adoption. All those in favour, and just to be clear, I'm putting resolutions 1 and 2. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. We move to the item of the governance review, and I welcome Deborah and Nikki McDonald before us to present the report. This is one of those mixed ones where some of the issues rest with our governance team and some with myself as mayor. I just wish to be clear that the recommendations on the appointment for the 2 new task forces are recommendations from me as mayor and not from staff. Nikki, do you want to give a brief overview of the paper? Then I'll cover off my portions of it, and then we'll open up to questions and then have some debate.
Well, in fact, Debbie's done most of the work on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll get Debbie to run the introduction if that's all right. Thank you, and through the Mayor. To be honest, I'll largely take this as read, but this report brings now to Council some of the discussions that have been had through workshops. You'll remember that the Mayor committed when the governance structure was first set in November last year to then reviewing with Council that initial governance structure, and this is now the discussion report following that review, which was undertaken in May as planned. And there are a number of points that have come through the discussions, including actions which Council and the Audit Risk and Finance Chair are keen to see, for example, some activity reporting being introduced. You'll see that there's 2 new task forces that are proposed to be established, and Mayor Nick has indicated that he would like to talk further to those and to the membership. So I'll leave that. And another action point that was felt to be important was some more clarity around task forces protocols. So a document has been prepared to give members of task forces and external participants a little bit more clarity around those as well. So those have been brought through. For noting, alongside the task force protocols have been brought forward some more clarity around council liaison roles. So hopefully that will be helpful, and information protocols. And just a note at the end of the recommendations there that following any decisions made today, that updates will be made to the delegations register as appropriate.
Thank you. If I was to firstly give the overview on my portions of this paper that I'm responsible for, I'm hugely encouraged by the way in which this council has responded to the governance changes that I made on initiating the council, that we wanted to be more collegial, that we wanted all councillors included in the key decisions. The review did identify some areas where my view is the governance structure that we put in place last November. The key one and the most important is that constant oversight that the governance needs the team have over the huge number of roles. And that is why the resolution 2 is a request from council for each of the key operational rings areas, the infrastructure, the environment, regulation and the community services, to provide a thorough 6-monthly review report to this full council body, so that we're getting that backlog and able to ensure that we are overseeing that part of our governance role. I don't think there's any council member that would question the importance of climate change. I accept it was an oversight last year in not having the task force from word go. I'm recommending Aaron Stallard as the chair of that task force. Everybody around this table would know the level of knowledge and passion that Aaron has in that area. And I think by establishing a task force in that area, it's going to be able to, with staff, ensure we keep the momentum on addressing the council's own emissions, addressing the emissions in our wider community, as well as the issues of mitigation. I openly accept that the play space task force is for a smaller, discrete issue. The reason I wish us to establish a task force in that area is I want elected member involvement in ensuring that we deliver as quickly as possible on that new play space in the central city. The reason I'm recommending Councillor Hodgson for that role is that he's had a passion for this issue of play space. He has children of the age that it's relevant, and with a small number of councillors, I believe that by establishing this task force, we're going to be able to deliver both faster and better the sort of play space to ensure that Nelson is a great place for children. The other part of the report provides for these 3 new protocols. One of the criticisms that is fair of the task force is that they're a little bit loose. And in my view, in having a protocol quite clear about what their powers are and what they're not. And I think that will help both the elected members and the staff for clarity. I also want to acknowledge the work that Campbell Rollo, Aaron Stallard, Matty, and Kahu has done as liaison councillors with specific communities. But I also think we will enhance those roles by being clearer about what those roles are. The other protocol deals with the issue of information. And again, in my view, that is just a refinement of our governance systems to try and make sure that we function well together. And so, as I've indicated, I'm going to move from the chair the adoption of resolutions 1 to 10 in the governance report and seek a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Skinner.
So there's a quick hand up for question time.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would like to do now is to take an informal time of questions and then have a formal debate. Tim.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your report. Just clarifying, sort of validating these task forces. So we have task forces which are great for us to sort of slipstream information for decision making at council. So with the climate one, just trying to validate for the climate change task force. Now I see a lot of that being operational. We have climate champions and staff on board for that information. I'm not at this stage convinced we need a task force for climate change. I'm all very supportive of us climate in regards to our internal processes and where we can improve. But when we're looking out beyond council operations and council policies, how do you think this is going to help or be beneficial to council and operation to getting stuff done?
Through the chair, if I could just respond to that. Yes, a good point. In fact, I think staff would find it very useful to have a task force in this area. We're in the middle of working on a climate change strategy, which is quite a high-level document. So having the opportunity to hear governance discussion around that really helps staff to know what issues to be looking at, to make sure that we're covering everything we need to in that strategic work, and to make sure that we're getting all the ideas that we need to be considered. And just given the level of public scrutiny, it is quite a big issue for the community, and we're getting some of that feedback actually through our resident survey, which will be coming back to you soon. So it does seem an important one to have sort of early input of governance thinking so that we can shape the work program in the right way.
Just as a follow-up on that, and thank you for that answer. In regards to, we've got good staff. In regards to that, in previous terms, we had a so-called climate champion. Is this going to make those roles now defunct, not necessary, or is this adding?
Through the chair, no, this is really to get input at that higher level. I mean, staff will obviously be involved in the operational level. They're doing a lot of work at the moment through activity management plans and shaping up projects and dollars for the next 10 years. This is more about council direction and objectives and the vision for what council will do with the community on climate change. So it's very much more at that governance level we see the task force operating. Staff are still very busy at the operational.
Thank you.
Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. In looking through the options that are presented in 5.1 through to 5.3, I note in 5.3 that the last comment in that point was that if we were to consider wider alterations to the governance structure, that this could potentially have implications for remuneration and allocation should roles and responsibilities shift. Does that not run slightly contrary to the general feeling that was held at the workshop that we had on that particular point? I was under the impression that the majority, I know it was only a workshop, but I was under the impression that the majority of members were of the opinion that if we were to change the governance structure to
potentially a committee structure that the majority of members would have been happy to keep the remuneration exactly as it is. I don't know whether, I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody, but that point does seem to run a little contrary to what I thought was the position. Can you recall that?
Through the chair, I can't specifically recall that point, sorry. The report is reflecting that it may trigger a conversation, I guess, between council. So if there were, depending on where council went today, if any changes to the existing governance structure wanted to be, council wanted to consider that in future, then there can be implications for remuneration where roles shift. If there are chairpersonships being established, for example, so people are holding a different level of responsibility, I guess, across the board, then it opens up a discussion as to whether council wants to reflect that in its remuneration. You'll remember the Remuneration Authority sets for councillors a pool which must be allocated in certain ways, and council decides then if it's comfortable with everybody, regardless of what they're doing, having the same, or whether they do want to reflect certain roles and responsibilities with some form of remuneration.
My recollection of the discussion was that some councillors felt that if you were to have a standard committee structure, that you would do the normal that this previous council has done and others, and that is that the chairs of the standing committees would have a different level of remuneration. But my recollection was that there were a range of views. Certainly the council has collectively had the view since November that apart from the deputy mayor, the remuneration pool would be spread equally. Councillor Bench.
I recall this discussion exactly as Councillor Rainey said.
Councillor Sanson.
I also recall it exactly as Councillor Rainey said, that, even if we were to change to a committee structure, there was quite wide support for maintaining equilibrium, the current equity on remuneration.
I certainly recall at least one person expressing an alternative view. I think Tim acknowledges that, but ultimately it's for council to decide. Any further questions? Matty, Councillor Anderson, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks, through the mayor. I'm just wondering, so I understand that task force information is going to be available for council members. I was wondering, is there a mechanism for transparency insofar as community, because I have heard, had some feedback, people wanting to know what's going on, and in the past they did have access to some information they don't now under the task force structure. And so is there a mechanism for being able to share, for communities to be able to access information through what we're doing now?
Sure, it has always been the case and will continue to be the case that the public can request information at any time. Under the Goimer Act, it does sound a little bit like a disease when it's said in its like that in its acronym form, but the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act does provide that all information held by council, it should be publicly available unless there's specific reason at that time for it not to be, which most reasons for withholding need to be weighed against a public interest test. So we're very careful with that. So yeah, there are definitely mechanisms for the public to request and have access to information even through the task force protocols. Thank you.
Councillor Brand.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I've got two different things. The first one, number 2, request the chief executive present a high-level 6-monthly report. Will that also provide information to the public on what avenues that they can then come into a public presentation, or who to contact instead of just the generic through the customer service. The reason I ask is that last term, when we had the committee structure and you had a chair and a deputy chair, and it covered the certain areas within council, public felt it was easier for them to access information and understanding on particular issues because they could go to particular councils. Or are we just saying contact whichever elected representative they feel most comfortable with on particular topics under those issues?
Through the chair, apologies. I guess the public are aware of who's on council. We have ward councillors now, and there are councillors that certain members of the public will automatically feel more comfortable. You know, they might know you better, might know individuals better. They might feel more comfortable approaching a ward councillor. They might feel more comfortable approaching that large councillor. So there remains that avenue. There's also in standing orders, has been long-standing the opportunity to request public forum through the governance team. So that will continue. And there's a document called the Local Governance Statement, which we're required to prepare within the 6 months following any election, that provides this information to the public as to how they can reach out to council. So that is up online and is this, as of this triennium, a live document. So we keep an eye and make sure that we're keeping that updated. So that's available to the public as well. So I guess there's already a number of avenues informing the public of their opportunities. I can't speak specifically as to what would be in that 16th monthly report, but my understanding of what was anticipated to be in that was more activity reporting as opposed to avenues for public forum.
Excuse me. Thank you for that. It's just I have had numerous inquiries of how people can more tailor to the particular areas instead of the generic council. And my second thing was actually about the task force makeup. I thank you for the opportunity to put me on to the City Centre Playground Task Force. However, I feel after reviewing my workload that's coming up that I would like to step out of that and remove myself and provide the opportunity for someone else to step in. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Sorry, Councillor, can you put your mic on?
Tēnā koe. Ki te haere atu I te tūru nei. Ko tāku pātai kia pōrua. So my question this morning is about, we have the iwi partnership agreement that's coming up that we're putting together towards November. I just want to see how, my question is, how is the climate change task force going to fit into that framework that we're establishing? And is it, my personal opinion is that at this stage, we can talk about it later, but that as a task force, it doesn't have the mana that it requires to be at that level to address a lot of the issues right across the board. But in particular, the partnership agreement that we're going to be entering into, how is this mechanism of the task force going to be able to successfully contribute to that? And is it being considered, no, it's not over the line yet, but is it going to be considered in part of that relationship?
Through the chair, so the terms of reference for the task force allows the task force to invite others along when there are particular issues of interest. But in terms of iwi involvement in the issue, we do have the Climate Change Advisory Group, which meets now and is in fact meeting right now. And iwi were offered 3 seats on that advisory group. And there's also an established mechanism for sort of a partnership approach about what is going into the climate change issue for council to involve iwi views. So that's probably in a more immediate way for our partnership with iwi to play out in the climate change space, as opposed to a task force, which are generally mostly elected member groups.
Cool. So I guess my question is more related around that the three councils are going to be one member of the partnership in the view of iwi, because we always just talk about iwi, but there's 8 of them. This seems like it's a underwhelming component that really needs to, that we're doubling up on tasks, it seems, for our own benefit, and when we're sort of inviting them to join in our Tea Party, how are they going to contribute, or how is that going to be beneficial to the actual partnership between councils, Te Tauihu councils and Te Tauihu Māori, our iwi?
Some of those questions probably directed at me, and that's my job as under the Act to recommend the makeup of both committees and task forces. And the discussion that I have had with the iwi leaders has been for welcome their participation on the task forces of which they had particular interest. And that has occurred with the Forestry Task Force. It's also occurred with the Marine Management Company. And exactly the same would apply with these. That is, where iwi had a particular interest, and obviously in the marina, obviously in the issue of forestry, that we would invite iwi to have a representative.
I think I've got some points to respond to that, but I think we'll save that for discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for you the discussions that I've had at the iwi Leaders Forum with our 2 neighbouring councils and 8 iwi. That's been the nature of the discussion.
Okay, so the main reason, my point is that we've got a partnership agreement recognising the ability and the resources within iwi to be able to respond to our needs, and then we're doing it again where we're providing a platform and saying, hey, you're invited, but they just don't have the resources to be able to respond to that. When they don't arrive, then we say, well, we gave them the chance. So that's where I'm going with that.
Sure. Other questions, Councillor Rainey? And then Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. I would have personal enthusiasm for being on the City Centre Play Space Task Force. Just, I don't know whether you're going to be open for consideration of others. The reason being is that as chair of community services, I championed the idea of a central city play space. And at the stage, my kids were 4 and 6 when that was taken out of the budget, to my disappointment.
Can I just,
they still like playing, but they're no longer 4 and 6. But I would have general enthusiasm for being on that task force, and also as urban design champion, I think it's tremendously important that we get this right, and that it is held up to the highest standards. So I have a real willingness to be on that task force. If you would,
I'd be delighted, and I just note with the seconder, Tim, as to whether you're happy. Oh, we've got an original resolution. Just to remind councillors of the process, at a workshop we discussed creating these task force. I sent a message out and said anybody that would like to express an interest, and then I worked with those people that had expressed an interest. Pete, I see a perfect match up with your work, both around the civic and the central city interest with this work, and with Trudy being unavailable, would welcome you being included in the resolution as a member of the 4-person team to work on that play space. Any other questions of our officers? I'm sorry, Tim.
Well, yeah,
Councillor Skinner.
Just correction, I don't believe I'd seconded what was in front of us. I'd put my hand up earlier for questions, so just in case. My question was, has there been any further consideration for a much needed arts task force?
Through the chair, was that the arts task force? Yes, we have one. We have an arts and creativity task force, which has started meeting recently. Yeah.
Are there any Councillor Courtney?
Nick, if you require a seconder to Pete's,
could I just be clarity, Tim? I've amended my original motion by substituting Councillor Brand for Councillor Pete Rainey. Are you comfortable as the seconder of the original resolution with that amendment?
I wasn't a seconder of the original resolution. I put my hand up earlier on when the question, which you gave me, on the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We do need a seconder. We will need a seconder if we're going to go into debate.
Yeah, so just for the record, I've indicated, I think Councillor Courtney is
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
He's happy to second the resolution, including the amendment. Excellent, got that on record. My apologies, Tim, for misinterpreting. Any further questions? Thanks to our officials. As the mover of the resolution and the refinements of our governance process, just make some opening comments and then open up the item for debate. The first point I would make is that the community is going to judge us on about our capacity to deliver results. And my experience with the task force on the library, the task force with respect to the storm recovery, the task force that Mel Courtney led with respect to the annual plan process, the work that Councillor Skinner is doing in the marina sports area, that the Deputy Mayor is doing in the arts area, in my view, proving very successful tools for progressing the collective work of this council. I love the combination of these informal task forces in which councillors and staff can get together, pretty openly kick around the issues, but also always having the test that the issue has to come back to full council and that all of the decisions are made equally by all of us 13 elected representatives. I think that have acted in good faith in having a workshop through this review and bringing through these tweaks to that process and establishing these 2 additional task forces and providing for these additional protocols to get a bit more discipline around how they work and also to provide for these 6 monthly reports in these key areas that are there. And that is the basis of which this report and these recommendations come to council and seek colleague support. Councillor Sneller.
Thanks, Nick. I certainly broadly support the recommendations before us. The report does acknowledge a degree of support around this table for additional standing committees as part of our governance structure, yet that option is not available in the report. I do support standing committees and I believe this should be considered. For that reason, I'd like to move an alternative motion that incorporates all the recommendations before us and goes further to include the establishment of standing committees. So I've forwarded that text and I look forward to having the chance to speak to this motion.
I have to say that I am deeply disappointed that as Mayor with council colleagues, I have been very open with colleagues as I've developed options. I have not turned up to this council meeting with resolutions that radically changed the path at the last moment. The first point I was aware of this resolution being moved by Councillor Stallard and Pakipaki was at 9:41 this morning. I would note that the Local Government Act says that the role and power of mayors is to, amongst other things, is responsibility for the establishment of committees. And so the council is, and I'm just going to get advice as to whether it is within standing orders, the resolution that you have moved. But I also have to say that I feel this is something of a very last minute change of direction from what has all informally been discussed. And so I do have to express deep disappointment because I have worked very hard over the last 8-9 months to build a very collegial council. And I do feel that this is something of nobody's had the courtesy to ring me and to say that they were going to go down this track. It has been something of an ambush. Mayor could bring to this council resolutions at 1 minute's notice and do the numbers and talk to council colleagues and do it. But that's not the way I would wish this council to operate. I also have to express that if you proceed down the road of the resolution that's been moved by Councillor Stallard, that I don't think it is consistent with the resolution. Why would you, for instance, require the Chief Executive to provide those 6 monthly reports to the full council if you were going to have standing committees? The resolution as a whole becomes unmanageable. It also, in my view, the view that it's been expressed by the Chief Executive, to me, was that you have either task forces or you have standing committees. You're really adding significantly to the governance structure. If there is a majority of councillors that wish to go down the road of standing committees, then my view is what we should do is defer the consideration of both lots of resolutions and then rework the governance structure around that, because my view is to have all those task forces and the standing committees and the 6 monthly reporting is going to create a bureaucratic system that will not serve this institution well. I know I have gone a little bit out of process in expressing that view. I don't know whether the Chief Executive wishes to express a view, but I do state objection both in terms of process and good governance with the resolution that has been moved and seconded. Chief Executive.
Nick, thank you very much. Look, I also too only saw this very, very late in the piece. And I accept that it's council's decision to make decisions in this matter. I do point out that I think this is substantially different to what was tabled in the report that was workshopped. I think that good governance from a council perspective requires good decision making. I would recommend that if there is an appetite for this change, that we allow officers time to work through all the issues. I think there are, just reading through this, there are a myriad that come to mind in terms of the Thursday and Friday work days, notwithstanding that or implying that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Saturday and Sunday aren't work days for councillors, but in terms of council business at the table, Thursday or Friday, how that fits in with workshops, the committees and the council meetings. I think that's going to be a problem and a challenge. I think we need to figure out from an officer point of view is how we resource those issues. But more importantly for me, in terms of good local government decision making, I think that these changes here need to be considered in terms of good decision making. And I don't believe, irrespective of what council will approve or not approve, that there is adequate time to consider these in relation to the existing. There seems to be a conflict there for me in terms of good decision making. So my recommendation would be to potentially to workshop this again, bring it back to council so you can actually understand the full implications. I cannot comment what the implications are right now. I think there's a bigger piece of work and that would be my recommendations. But my major concern is good decision making, which is what is being proposed here is contrary to the intent of the original report.
So the way I intend to proceed is that the resolution, the amendment, can I get clarity? I've got a question mark. When the local,
sorry, Mr. Chair, just as a seconder to this motion, can I just respond to the first statement that you were allowed plenty of opportunity to make before?
Yes, let me tell you the process I intend to go forward. I was just going to make that clarity.
I wanted to do that prior to.
The first step is I would like to get clarification from officials as to whether the amendment is in order with the Act. in that the Act says that it is for the Mayor to establish committees of the Territorial Authority. So I just want to get an opinion from them as to whether the resolution is in order. If I have clarification that the resolution is in order, then it is my intention to allow both the mover and seconder to speak to it, then for us to debate the resolution and then to put it. I think that's the fair process moving forward. So firstly, can I, and if it's going to take some time, because I look, officials only got this a few moments ago, what I might do is allow the mover and the seconders and others to debate the resolution while our officers have got the opportunity to just be able to check with respect to the Act and whether the resolution is in order. The other thing that we'll do is I am going to adjourn this debate at 10:25 to just deal with that item of the Mayor's report. And that will then effectively mean that this item will carry over to after that. And so what I'm going to do just on the cuff is give the council officials time to consider the issue of the, is it in order? You're effectively going to have, I'm going to ask for you to give that ruling at 10 to 11, just to give a bit more time for that piece of work to be done thoroughly. So my intention is to proceed with the mover, Aaron, being able to speak to his resolution. Then the seconder, and that is, I think, as far as we'll get before we then just do that last item from the Mayor's report.
Thanks, Minik. And look, process is important. And I do wonder if we could just reflect on what's happened already and to what degree the Mayor should be entering what I would consider debate mode before the mover has spoken to the motion, and then we enter into debate among ourselves. And I know this is constantly a learning process, but I would reflect on what's happened already. In terms of what's before us, the task forces, for the moment, are a bit of a side issue, because this is not, do we have standing committees versus do we have task forces? What we are considering is if we want to continue with having a single all of council meeting each month to consider all of the council business that comes across the table? Or do we want to move towards these standing committees that are successfully employed by basically every other committee in the country of our size or larger? Every other council, thank you. And to me, there are some clear benefits from us considering this move to standing committees. Firstly is simply one of transparency. I believe that the community needs to see perhaps more than what they have been in this term of issues being debated and explored appropriately. Secondly, I think to move to standing committees would make use of the wide range of skills and experience around this table that I believe are currently being underutilised. It would also give experience to councillors. I believe it would also address what I see as a problematic and unusual centralisation of power in this council, will result in a wider distribution of responsibilities. Regarding task forces, we all do want to make progress and get results. We also want to enhance our ability as a council to drive positive change for our communities. And I believe it's that aspect, the change we want to see, that will be best delivered by these standing committees. A bit has been spoken about good governance. These issues have been thoroughly explored in workshops already. We have, I believe, a reasonable understanding of the options before us. It's not some kind of black hole. And I believe, as I touched on earlier, that the public should see us debate these options, and options should be brought to the table coming out of the workshops. And perhaps we've been slightly misstepping in this regard to date.
Kia ora, Mayor. I just wanted to respond to the first comment, just to challenge the notion that this is out of the blue and that there's an ambush here. I personally have had conversations with you I know that there's been quite a number of conversations, including the Deputy Mayor, that has been going on behind the scenes about this, and that it is not like it is an unknown. I made it very clear to you last week on the phone that this was what's been put forward is really what we need a level of consideration of. Now, in particular, we have workshopped this, and my greatest criticism of the workshop was around the amount of information, or the information that was provided to us. And really what that was is it described the model how it exists, but it didn't give us examples of what it could be. And for those of the newer councillors around the table, it was kind of a little bit of a black room that we didn't know quite what was inside. So we really didn't get the opportunity to be able to canvass those. And I will note that the existing, or the previous veteran councillors that we've got amongst us were in favour of the committee structure, and we've had quite a number of discussions about that. So I would like to, I support the advice from our governance team that we would go forward and we actually discuss this, but we need to discuss it in its entirety, because we weren't really put, the options weren't really put towards us, to us. They were just, this is how it's running at the moment. Are people happy or not? So, you know, when our choices in the workshop itself is limited, therefore our ability to make a good decision about how that governance structure should look like, I think was quite limited. Got it up.
I will exercise a right of reply. It was clear at the workshop that a majority of members supported the recommendations in the paper. It is clear that people had alternative.
Point of order, standing orders. Apologies, but do you have a right to reply just now?
I think my reply, mine was reply to your statement. So then now with how many times do I get to reply back to
Standing orders of council provide for matters of clarification, and I, as chair, am going to exercise my right to clarify